Hi there. I am here to talk to you about the Zika virus outbreak that happened in Miami in 2016. So what is Zika? Well, it's an arthropod-borne, single-stranded RNA virus in the flavivirus genus that's closely related to dengue, West Nile virus, and yellow fever virus. It's vectored by mosquitoes, specifically the Aedes aegypti, which is yellow fever mosquito, and Aedes albopictus, which is the Asian tiger mosquito. And the name comes from the forest in Uganda where it was found. Zika actually means overgrown in the Luganda language. The pathogenicity of Zika is it tends to be pretty mild, asymptomatic, or the symptoms are not that bad, and it lasts several days to a week. And this is the way it presents in the majority of people who become sick from Zika. The problem exists when pregnant women become infected with Zika, because in that case, they can have fetal abnormalities that include brain damage or microcephaly. Microcephaly is when an infant's head is smaller because the brain doesn't develop properly or it stops growing. And this can lead to some real developmental issues of the child as it grows up. In addition to pregnant women, Zika has also been associated with the Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease leading to the body attacking the peripheral nerves, leading to numbing, tingling, possibly paralysis, and even death. Zika was first found in 1947 by scientists who were studying yellow fever, and they saw it in a rhesus macaque monkey in the Zika forest of Uganda. A case was identified in a person in 1954, and it was a 10-year-old girl in Nigeria. And then it was found in Asia in a mosquito in 1966, so it had spread from Africa to Asia in a very short period of time. But it was not found in a person until 1977 in Asia, in Central Java, Indonesia. Now, the first major outbreak occurred in 2007 on Yap Island, where 73% of the population was infected, but it caused mild illness. And between 1947 and 2006, less than 20 cases had been reported globally. But then 2013 came, and there was a very big outbreak in French Polynesia. Nearly 30,000 people were infected, and this was where there were some changes seen with the symptoms of the disease. The first case of Guillain-Barré syndrome was identified. It was found in bodily fluids, semen, saliva, and urine, which indicated that there might be sexual transmission. It was transmitted from the infected mother to the fetus, and there was evidence that the blood banks were at risk. By 2014, it had spread to New Caledonia, the Cook Islands, Easter Island, and very quickly throughout the South Pacific. And then in 2015, it was identified in Brazil, thought to have arrived there by people coming from the South Pacific who were attending the World Cup soccer games in 2014. So what was the tipping point for this virus where it became really scary bad? We know up until about 2014, everything reported about it was that it was mild and self-limiting and very short course of disease. But that outbreak in French Polynesia showed a change where there were methods of transmission that were not previously identified and new clinical signs. Now, either the virus became more virulent, or because there were so many people infected, something that was already present just manifested because of the sheer size of people being infected. Regardless, in Brazil, there was a significant uptick of cases of microcephaly. In fact, it was 20 times higher than it had been in the previous 5 years. And the number of Guillain-Barré cases also increased in that period of time. And because this was becoming a really significant problem, the World Health Organization declared a public health emergency of international concern, which is a big deal. The United States then declared a public health emergency for counties where residents had travel-associated cases of Zika, meaning that they brought it with them. It wasn't something that they got infected in the U.S. And then shortly after that, the CDC elevated its Emergency Operations Center activation to level 1, which is the highest response reserved for critical emergencies. On April 1st, the CDC held a meeting to coordinate a response, and they created a number of tools, protocols, and materials that were to be used with local state health departments and plans for this crisis. And in May of 2016, the CDC started to recommend testing urine for Zika infection to start screening individuals to see if a Zika existed in the United States. Now, the Florida Health Department, as the result of the CDC declaring the emergency for counties with Zika travel-related cases, found 4 Florida counties to be under this public health emergency: Miami-Dade County, Hillsborough, Lee, and Santa Rosa counties. And in Florida, in February, between February and July, there was screening looking for the Zika virus. And so July 29th, 2016, the first outbreak of mosquito-transmitted Zika in the continental U.S. was identified in the Wynwood neighborhood of Miami-Dade County. And this means that it wasn't travel-related. It was a mosquito in the United States was carrying Zika virus and bit a person who was in the United States. Shortly after that, the governor directed the health department to request a CDC emergency response team, which is a team that's deployed to help support state and local health departments in their epidemiologic investigations. So this was investigated in Florida, looking more closely at the mosquito-borne transmission cases of Zika. And as a result of the investigations, 4 people in Broward and Miami-Dade counties were confirmed to have Zika that was mosquito-borne transmission. Based off of this, an intense investigation was launched where household contacts were interviewed, and also they were tested for Zika virus. And it wasn't just related to the household members. The neighborhood was also interviewed and sampled, of the neighborhood within 150 to 300 meters of each patient's residence. In addition, the workplaces of these individuals was examined for Zika in the area around the worksite, and the people who worked with the patients who had positively identified for Zika. And as a result of this investigation, 29 persons were confirmed to have Zika in a 6-block area. Now, the clinical criteria for diagnosis of Zika is that a person has one or more of these symptoms that are not explained by another etiology. So they can have an illness that resembles Zika with symptomatically, but they can't find another reason for the symptoms, such as a fever, rash, arthralgia, or conjunctivitis. If a woman who has a pregnancy that is complicated by a fetal loss or some congenital defects, or if somebody has Guillain-Barré syndrome. These are all reasons to further investigate looking for Zika. And the way to investigate and to measure in laboratory is usually PCR on serum and urine, and that's done within the first 3 weeks of the acute illness. And there are other ways to test, including seroconversion, looking for IgM, and some other methods. The case definition of Zika is either that a person has a disease, which is the symptomatic infection and symptomatic description, or just an infection where they're not symptomatic. And it can be confirmed, probable, or suspect. And the difference is, with a confirmed case of disease, there's an illness in conjunction with a confirmed laboratory evidence as well as meeting epidemiologic criteria. And an infection is the confirmed laboratory evidence and the epidemiologic criteria, but does not show disease. Probable is similar, except that it's presumptive laboratory evidence instead of confirmed, and then a suspected case is only supportive laboratory evidence, not as strong as a presumptive laboratory evidence. The investigation brought out an epicurve for these 29 cases, and what you can see is that the symptoms of disease started around the last week of June and ran through to the first week of August, where they were symptomatic. Remember, the first case was diagnosed July 29th, and the incubation period for Zika is about 3 to 14 days. So on August 1st, the CDC blocked off a 1 square mile area of the Wynwood neighborhood of Miami, along with a buffer area, to call out that this was an area where there was Zika, and pregnant women should be cautious about coming to this area or should not visit it. And in fact, on August 8th, they started spraying for mosquitoes to decrease the vector population. This area was expanded on September 17th to include a zone on Miami Beach, and then on October 13th, it was further expanded to include the Little River area in Miami-Dade because there were new cases that were being seen. But by December of 2016, all the restrictions had been lifted because there were no more cases identified, and the mosquitoes in the area were not showing that they were carrying Zika anymore. And then by June 2nd of 2017, there were no longer any travel recommendations necessary for Zika virus or any restrictions. So how did this work? Well, the area did integrated mosquito control, where they did pesticide dispersion, killing adult mosquitoes using a pesticide, and larvicide with it's a bacteria that kills the larval mosquito larva. They did source reduction, which eliminate mosquito habitats, looking at structural barriers like screens and air-conditioned spaces, and an intensive community education program. In fact, in Florida, the Florida State Health Department had something called Drain and Cover, which taught individuals how to get rid of mosquito habitats and how to protect themselves. This mosquito spraying was somewhat controversial because they used a chemical called Nalid, which is an organophosphate pesticide. It's registered for use in the EPA since 1959, but has been found to cause nausea, dizziness, confusion, and possibly convulsions and death. But the CDC stated that to get these effects, the exposure had to be at much higher levels than were dispensed during the aerial spraying. However, people were still concerned because this chemical had been banned in Europe since 2012 and was classified as harmful to aquatic life, dangerous if swallowed, and harmful if it came in contact with skin. And so there's a lot of uproar and controversy about this spraying. In addition, there were a lot of bees that were killed, and butterflies, and the good insects that are beneficial to the environment that were killed by this, because it was it did not discriminate against those insects. Regardless of the protests, they did spray, and what you could see is that the mosquito strategies actually worked. On this chart, on the vertical axis is the mosquito counts, which the higher at the top with 0 at the bottom, and across the bottom is the timing from July through to September. And the black arrows represent when there was adulticide or larvicide applications. And in July, you can see the number of mosquitoes that were being trapped were high, and all the way through August was also high. But by the time they reached September, those numbers were significantly dropped, and that seems to be a strong reason why the cases dropped as well. And you can see that the Zika infections in 2016 were very high, even non-travel related cases, but by 2017 those non-travel related cases had dropped to 2, and then as of April of this year there were no cases reported of Zika. If you look at the last 3 years from 2016, it becomes obvious that this mosquito control and the community education and all the endeavors by the health department has worked to control Zika. So basically, this public health investigation showed that the CDC, state, local health department responses to Zika were very rapid, and they did thoroughly address most of the pressing public health needs that were associated with the outbreak. The cases were quickly identified and the spread of Zika was controlled through epidemiologic investigation and through a lot of public education. The aggressive mosquito control in Miami Beach was credited with primarily having that swift control of the Zika outbreak, regardless of the outcry against the pesticides. And the cumulative Zika disease case count that I showed in the last slide really underscores how successful the program was at getting Zika under control in Florida. So what does the future hold about Zika? Well, we know that the incidence is decreasing, but we can't expect that Zika is gone. And it is a serious threat because of the damage it can do to fetuses, the microcephaly, and also the Guillain-Barré virus. So the primary need is to develop a vaccine, and there's a lot of aggressive work being done to develop the vaccine. There also is a need for better testing because these flaviviruses cross-react and it becomes difficult to make the true diagnosis for Zika. And in addition, there's a lot of new vector control programs that are being examined. In particular, genetically modified mosquitoes are being used and it's going to be implemented as of this year in Florida. And that may hopefully decrease the need for dangerous pesticides and be better vector control to prevent these mosquito-borne diseases. Thank you, and I am available for any questions you might have.